What if I told you an NFL wants to play a single snap? This isn't a conspiracy theory. This isn't social media speculation. Browns insiders just went on the record and admitted there was a deliberate agenda. Yes, a real one, inside the Cleveland Browns organization to keep Shedeur Sanders off the field. And what's coming out now doesn't just expose bias and politics. It exposes a full-blown cover-up. We're talking about insiders flat out admitting they were handed misinformation directly from the organization. Lies designed to discredit a rookie quarterback who was outperforming veterans behind the scenes. And then they spread those lies on air, to press conferences, to fans, to you, and never questioned it, until now. See, when it comes to the NFL, we like to believe that talent wins out. That the guy who works harder, performs better, and shows up every day will eventually get his shot. But what if that's no longer true? What if the NFL isn't the ultimate meritocracy we think it is? Because this story, this one right here, this is one of the most disturbing cases of media manipulation, personal agenda, and player sabotage that we've seen in years. And it was aimed at a young quarterback who did everything right, showed up early, dominated in practice, kept his head down, and still got treated like a problem no one wanted to acknowledge. It gets worse. Because the guy pulling the strings, the reason this never made sense from day one, that trail leads straight to Browns head coach Kevin Stefanski and what insiders are now calling his anti-Shedeur agenda. This wasn't just bad judgment, this was personal. But guess what? That agenda. It backfired, spectacularly. Now Shedeur Sanders isn't just playing, he's dominating. He's breaking records. And the very same insiders who spread lies about him, they're now going on air and confessing the truth. The Browns tried to bury him, and the only reason he's playing now is because injuries left them no choice. And what's happening behind the scenes paints a disturbing picture of how the NFL really works, and just how many players might be getting buried by people with agendas, not evaluations. But it didn't start this week. It didn't even start this season. This hidden war against Shedeur Sanders started long before his first NFL snap. And once you see the receipts, from insider quotes to practice data to Stefanski's silence, it all becomes impossible to ignore. Listening, a Browns insider went on ESPN Cleveland and said what no NFL team ever wants the public to hear. There were agendas, and only now have we really seen it play out. Let that hang for a second. This wasn't a Reddit leak. This wasn't blog speculation. This was a journalist, inside the Browns media circle, stating clearly that people within the organization had personal agendas against players, including Shedeur Sanders, and allowed those agendas to shape decisions from the start of the season. But he didn't stop there. Another Browns insider, on the very same broadcast, added a jaw-dropping confession. He admitted that he had been fed carefully crafted information by the team. And like he put it himself, he was just a sucker at the poker table, buying it all, hook, line, and sinker. Think about how many fans heard that information. How many podcasts repeated it? How many tweets were written off those takes? And now, we know how much of it was manufactured from the top down. But it gets worse. Because these weren't just minor exaggerations or slanted press snippets. The information being shared was deeply damaging, painting Shedeur, before he ever got a chance, as someone who wasn't ready, wasn't focused, and couldn't even hold a football properly. Yes, you heard that right. One insider quoted people inside the team saying Shedeur Sanders couldn't hold a football, a Heisman-level college standout, a player known for mechanics, leadership, and poise, and they were saying he wasn't even functional enough to grip a football. The craziest part. One reporter admitted on air that not only did he repeat those claims to fans, but he also dismissed opposing opinions as uninformed. He said he was shouted down by others in the media when trying to defend Shedeur's potential. As far as they were concerned, everybody in the building thought Shedeur was a lost cause. But as we now know, that wasn't true. Not even close. The performance data was there. The QB tracker numbers, created and released by the Browns themselves, had Shedeur rated higher than everyone else in camp, better than Flacco, more consistent than Gabriel, more accurate than Rudolph. That insider literally said on air, "I knew he was good. I watched the tape. I kept saying it would translate. And I was told I wasn't talking to the right people." That's code. That's media speak for. I was told to shut up because I wasn't pushing the narrative the team wanted. Now here's where this gets truly unprecedented. These reporters are now starting to realize they were used to bury a promising player, used to shape public opinion. used to cover up decisions that had nothing to do with performance and everything to do with personality, ego, and control. The Insider summed it up with what might be the most honest line you'll hear from a mainstream sports outlet this year. They gave us the spin, and we ate it up. And then we spoon-fed it to everybody else. That's not just an admission. That's a breakdown of how agenda-driven narratives infect an entire franchise, from locker rooms to press conferences, from training camp to your TikTok feed. But ask yourself this: why? Why would a respected NFL franchise go out of its way, behind closed doors and through media partners, to sabotage a young quarterback? What did Shedeur Sanders ever do to deserve that? He didn't trash the organization. He didn't create a distraction. He wasn't disrespectful. He simply showed up, got to work, and outperformed expectations. Period. So why try to bury him? That question leads us somewhere a lot darker than just bad evaluations or simple favoritism. This wasn't an honest mistake. The Insiders said it themselves. This was about agendas, not misreads, not coaching errors, agendas. And here's another question no one wants to answer. How many other players have this happened to? How many talented young stars got pushed down, left off rosters, or written off altogether because someone behind the scenes decided they didn't fit the plan? Because Shedeur didn't fit someone's plan. And now that's clear. One insider even said aloud, "It's crazy that nobody stepped back and said, 'Hey, are we all just repeating a line here?'" They were locked into a tunnel vision narrative. Nobody fact-checked the stories, even when the data screamed the truth. And the data was damning. Every touch chart, every stat breakdown from practice, every rated scrimmage, it all pointed the same direction. Shedeur was playing at a higher level than anyone else on the roster. But instead of giving him a real shot, they explained him away, pushed him to the bottom of the chart, told the media he wasn't ready, then sat back while that misinformation spread across the league. Let's be clear, this was a full-blown character assassination disguised as professional evaluation. And only now are the Insiders starting to realize their role in it, not just as passive observers, but active messengers of agenda-driven talking points. Some of these reporters, whether they admit it or not, were co-conspirators in hiding the real story. The Browns had a gem on their hands and tried to pretend he wasn't even there. They wanted Shedeur erased from the equation. But now, they can't avoid his name. They can't spin his stats. And they can't pretend anymore that this was just how things go in football, because the Insiders confessed. And now the cover-up is crumbling. So now we know the Insiders admitted it, there were agendas. But the next question is just as important. How were they hiding it? How do you take a player like Shedeur Sanders, who is clearly outperforming everyone in practice, and convince the world he's not even worth a second look? The answer? You manipulate the narrative. From the outside, it seemed subtle. Just a few off-handed comments from media personalities, a lack of hype, quiet drops of doubt inserted into the daily coverage. But when you start pulling it all together, the pattern becomes crystal clear. From day one, Browns connected media began creating small cracks in Shedeur's image. They said he wasn't NFL ready. They said his fundamentals were shaky. And most tellingly, they pushed one specific storyline over and over. He's just not developing fast enough. It became the default criticism, the excuse for everything. Why he wasn't getting reps, why he wasn't mentioned in team pressers, why he was fourth string going into the season. But here's the problem. It was a complete fabrication. One reporter, reflecting on the narrative, openly admitted on air, "It's shocking what was said about Shedeur behind the scenes about his supposed lack of development, and it was hogwash." Yes, hogwash. His word, not ours. See, the truth is, there was no valid reason to question Shedeur's development. The Browns have actual training camp data, hard performance metrics from their own QB tracker system, showing he was outperforming not just other rookies, but veterans, including Super Bowl MVP Joe Flacco in areas like decision-making, velocity, placement, and situational awareness. And yet, somehow, Flacco was hailed as the directions expert, the steady arm, the safe pair of hands. Dylan Gabriel was praised as a high-upside development project. Mason Rudolph was described as a game manager ready to surprise people. Shedeur, on the other hand, barely mentioned. And when he was, it was in negative or dismissive tones. And ask yourself this: why was his name left out entirely for 2 months by the head coach, Kevin Stefanski? Think about that. For 8 straight weeks, Shedeur Sanders, the top performer in camp according to their own numbers, was never once acknowledged publicly by the man making the quarterback decisions. No quotes, no updates, not even a mention in post-practice interviews. And that's not just odd, that's calculated. That's a complete erasure campaign, launched internally and echoed externally through friendly media. The goal? Convince the public he wasn't ready. Convince fans he didn't matter. That way, when he was kept off the depth chart, nobody would ask questions. This is where the media manipulation becomes dangerous. Because once insiders start repeating phrases like, "He's not ready," or "He's just not developing," Shedeur wasn't doing enough behind the scenes, when in fact the opposite was true. One of the most chilling quotes came from an ESPN Cleveland segment where a host confessed to pushing misinformation based on what the team gave them. Here's what he basically said. "They were telling me he couldn't do anything, that he couldn't hold a football, and I believed it, I bought it, I spread it." This is how reputations are destroyed before they're ever realized, not on the field, not in real competition, but in quiet conversations, whispered in the ears of trusted media voices who then go on air and build a false profile. The Browns didn't just ignore Shedeur. They built a smokescreen to cover him up, then acted surprised when people started noticing their rookie quarterback wasn't even getting practice snaps. And remember, this wasn't just from random leaks or beat writers with shaky connections. This came straight from the media voices closest to the organization. These are the radio hosts, insiders, and analysts who have weekly contact with front office staff, assistants, and Stefanski himself. They weren't guessing. They weren't speculating. They were given a script built on a lie. But Shedeur didn't fit the story they wanted, the underdog walk-on, the quiet developmental project, the humble grinder. He was a high-profile, highly marketed quarterback. He had cameras on him. He had Coach Prime behind him. He had pressure. And most of all, he had expectations. And that scared some people. Because if you admit that a young quarterback from Colorado is outperforming every vet on your roster, then you have to explain why he's not playing. And the only explanation left is the truth. There was an agenda. So instead, the Browns publicly talked about Flacco's veteran poise. They hyped Dillon Gabriel's leadership. They dropped casual negativity about Shedeur's body language, his attitude, or his supposed work ethic. And never once did they mention the stats. Never once did they say, "Here's what the data shows." Because the data showed they were wrong. So the media coverage became a deflection shield. Phrases like, "Still raw, needs time to adjust to the speed of the game, hasn't shown quite enough yet, the coaching staff wants to see more in the film room," all vague, all unprovable, all strategically safe. And now, the reporters who repeated them are realizing they were pawns. Not because they were malleoled. And now, those narratives are falling apart in real time. Because Shedeur did play. He did dominate. And all those development concerns suddenly vanished the second he had a real offensive line and a real game to prove himself. Now the people who spread the stories, they're backtracking. And they should be. Because what they helped cover up wasn't just a personnel mistake. It was a conscious attempt to delay, derail, or destroy a player's opportunity over bias, not merit. And the longer it went, the more obvious it became. This wasn't about football anymore. So far, we've heard the insiders confess. There were agendas makes all of this undeniable. The data. One thing about numbers, they don't lie, they don't have bias. They don't care if a player is flashy or quiet, famous or unknown, hyped or slept on. All the QB tracker saw was performance. And according to that performance-based system, built by the Browns' own staff and reported internally, Shedeur Sanders outplayed every other quarterback in team practices from day one. Let's rewind to training camp in Berea, Ohio, back in July and August. The Browns were running their quarterback competition and publishing QB tracker updates, which gave fans and analysts insight into how each quarterback performed in drills, scrimmages, and live play simulations. Here's what the tracker showed. Joe Flacco, completion percentage around 58%. Several red zone struggles. Limited mobility. Mason Rudolph and Dillon Gabriel, inconsistent. Flashes here and there, but neither separated themselves as a viable long-term option. Shedeur Sanders, highest overall rating in camp, best decision-making, best accuracy on short and intermediate throws, best pocket presence under pressure. And this isn't commentary. This isn't opinion. This came straight from the team's own evaluation tool. So let's ask the obvious. How do you bury the player who's leading every category in your own performance system? You don't. Unless you planned all along. And that's exactly what the Browns did. Despite dominating the internal metrics, Shedeur was placed fourth on the depth chart. Not second, not third, fourth. Behind every other QB on the roster, including Dillon Gabriel, who wasn't just outplayed, he was statistically subpar according to the tracker. And even stranger, Shedeur was told he would not see the field at all in his rookie season. He was reportedly redshirted, treated like a long-term project. The best performer in camp? Watching from the sidelines while names like Flacco and Rudolph took top reps. Make it make sense. If this was really about performance, Shedeur would have been, at minimum, QB2, maybe even QB1 considering how much other QBs were struggling. But performance wasn't the priority. The internal metrics didn't matter. The QB tracker was supposed to reveal the truth, and it did. They just didn't like the answer. Because if you make decisions based on what the QB tracker showed, then you're forced to acknowledge Shedeur was your best shot at winning now. And for reasons we're only beginning to understand, someone high up didn't want that. Let's go back to the radio again. Another Cleveland insider was asked point blank, was Shedeur the best quarterback in July in Berea with their own tracking data? Their answer? Yes, the QB tracker says so. No hesitation, no caveats, just yes. That's about as clear as it gets. But then came the real bombshell, the follow-up question that forced everyone to confront the truth head-on. Does that bother you that your professional football organization couldn't identify the best quarterback in their own building? The answer? Yes. Short, honest, brutal. Imagine that. You're a billion-dollar NFL franchise. You implement a data-backed evaluation system to make smarter training camp decisions. That system clearly points to one guy, Shedeur Sanders, and not only do you ignore it, you bury him. And you don't just bury him, you literally pretend like he's not even in the room. And here's where things move from football mistake to something way more disturbing. This wasn't a case of we saw something different on tape. There was zero football justification offered by the team. No specific plays, no breakdowns. All the coaching staff ever said, when pressed about Shedeur's absence, was vague coach speak. He's developing. We like what we see. He needs more patience in the system. All meaningless deflection lines. The proof was measurable and they pretended it didn't exist. And if you needed one final nail in the coffin, listen to this. Those QB tracker stats were public at first, released every few days. But once fans started pointing out that Shedeur was consistently leading in performance data, those updates suddenly stopped coming. The transparency vanished. Coincidence or cleanup? It makes you wonder what they were trying to suppress, and whether pulling those updates was a strategic move to stop the growing conversation around why Shedeur wasn't being given a shot. Look, NFL coaches misread talent all the time. That's part of the game. Sometimes you swing and miss. But this wasn't a swing and a miss. This was willful blindness. The data screamed, "This is your guy." And they stuck their fingers in their ears and whispered, "No, he's not," over and over, until the fans started asking questions, until the media started sniffing around, until injuries forced their hand and they finally had to put Shedeur on the field. And then, boom, 364 yards, 4 touchdowns, multiple comeback drives, every lie crumbled in one game. And now, the people who ignored the numbers, who parroted team-fed narratives, who acted like performance didn't matter, they're all scrambling. Some are apologizing. Others are staying quiet. But the truth? The QB tracker, their own system, was trying to save them from their own agenda. They just refused to look. So the data said Shedeur Sanders was the best QB on the Browns roster. The insiders admitted there was an agenda. Media, looking back, realizes they were fed lies and passed them along without asking questions. But the most disturbing part of this entire story? Kevin Stefanski never said Shedeur's name. Not once, not publicly, for 2 full months. Let that sink in. Deshaun Watson was getting media updates even while injured. Joe Flacco, constant mentions, compliments, a clear understanding of his role. Even Dillon Gabriel, barely out of college, thrown in as QB3, was mentioned in pressers. But Shedeur Sanders, a complete ghost, like he didn't exist. This is the franchise's leading QB in training camp by performance, and the head coach just refused to acknowledge him. That's bizarre, unprofessional, and in the NFL, unheard of. Because let's be real, NFL coaches usually can't stop talking about their rookie project QBs. Even if they don't play them, they talk about development, future plans, what they're seeing on tape. But Kevin Stefanski, he treated Shedeur as if saying his name would somehow validate him, as if acknowledging reality would disrupt the narrative he'd already decided on. And that silence doesn't happen by accident, not in today's NFL. So the question becomes, why? Why would the head coach of an NFL team ignore a young quarterback who was destroying expectations, dominating in practice, and had public support from the team owner himself? Because here's the kicker. While Stefanski was ignoring Shedeur, Browns owner Jimmy Haslam was standing on camera at a Colorado game next to Shedeur Sanders, laughing, smiling, shaking hands, and saying, "We're glad to have you. You need anything, we'll take care of you." Let's connect the dots. The owner had no problem showing support for Sanders. The owner told media it was vital to get rookie QB's real-time experience before the 2026 draft. And the owner publicly stated that Stefanski and GM Andrew Berry were discussing this daily. In other words, ownership was not the problem. So while fans assumed Shedeur's lack of playing time was part of a bigger long-term strategy, reality was much stranger. Ownership wanted him to play. Yet Stefanski, the man with authority over who took the field, did everything possible to ensure Shedeur stayed fourth string. That he stayed invisible, that his name was never uttered aloud. Browns insiders finally said it on ESPN Cleveland. "I don't think Stefanski wanted any part of Shedeur from day one." And that's the moment this story shifts from misunderstanding to malice, because what Stefanski did wasn't passive. It wasn't just, "He's not our guy." It was an active erasure of a player's presence, voice, and opportunity. And the reason it was so effective? Because silence doesn't cause controversy. You can't quote silence. You can't question a depth chart if no one's explaining it. A coach ignoring a player isn't an obvious scandal. It happens in the shadows, in meetings, in rotation assignments, in who gets first team reps and who doesn't. And Stefanski never explained it. Never justified why Shedeur, with elite practice stats, was buried behind less efficient QBs. Never addressed the QB tracker data. Never fielded questions about it. Just deflected. So we're left with one ugly truth. This wasn't a football decision. This was personal. This was political. And it's not just about Stefanski preferring veterans. If that were the case, why give Dillon Gabriel more reps than Shedeur? It wasn't about experience. It wasn't about performance. It wasn't about fit. It was about control. It was about ego. It was about agenda. A coach clinging to power and narrative, refusing to budge, even when his own system told him he was wrong. And here's the tragic irony. That erasure, that silencing, it didn't just delay Shedeur's development. It deprived the fans of seeing their actual best quarterback until injuries forced Stefanski's hand. Shedeur didn't get his shot because he earned it. He got it because the team ran out of excuses to keep hiding him. And the instant he stepped on that field, everything changed. 364 yards, 4 touchdowns, clutch comeback drives, national attention. Record-breaking day. All the narratives evaporated in real time. The media scrambled to recover. Stefanski stumbled through explanations. Reporters started confessing what they'd been told and what they'd repeated without questioning. The plan to bury Shedeur backfired, spectacularly. And now, everyone's asking the same question the ESPN Cleveland team asked when it was all said and done. Does it bother you that your team couldn't recognize the best quarterback in the building? How do you not recognize it? Unless you refuse to see it. Now that we've seen Kevin Stefanski's silence, we need to go higher up the ladder. Because if the head coach went out of his way to ignore Shedeur Sanders, the question becomes, was this the Browns' overall plan? Was the entire organization on board with burying their best rookie quarterback? At first glance, it might seem that way. But when you actually look at what the owner of the Cleveland Browns said, publicly, and on record, the facts don't just raise questions. They blow the lid off the whole thing, because team owner Jimmy Haslam made it crystal clear what he wanted. Absolutely. Kevin Stefanski knows how important it is to get rookies game experience. He and GM Andrew Berry talk about it daily. It's a constant conversation, a priority. Let's read between the lines. Haslam wasn't just suggesting rookie QBs should get reps. He was pointing directly at the coaching staff, saying, "They know the expectations. I've made it clear." So why didn't they follow through? Why was Shedeur Sanders fourth on the depth chart? Kept far away from first-team reps, buried behind Dillon Gabriel and Mason Rudolph, when the owner himself said rookie development was absolutely critical. There's only one explanation that fits. Haslam's message was ignored. And that tells you exactly where the agenda came from. This wasn't an organizational philosophy handed down from ownership. This wasn't a rebuild strategy or long-term redshirt plan. This was a coaching-level decision, crafted and executed by the people standing on the sideline every day, starting with Kevin Stefanski. And remember, this isn't some rogue theory. It's right there in the facts. Fact 1. Haslam was seen greeting Shedeur Sanders warmly at a Colorado game, telling him, "We're glad to have you." That's not someone trying to distance themselves from the Sanders family. That's public support. Fact 2. Shedeur outperformed every other quarterback in training camp. That's the Browns' own data talking, not media spin. Fact 3. The head coach didn't mention his name publicly for 2 months, even while hyping up lesser-performing QBs. Connect the dots, and it's clear. Haslam didn't have a problem with Shedeur. Kevin Stefanski did. So if Haslam was pushing rookie development and Shedeur was outperforming all the other rookies, then why was Dillon Gabriel getting reps? Because this was never about giving rookies a chance. It was about denying one specific rookie the chance. That's what makes this whole thing so suspicious. Shedeur wasn't benched because he was a rookie. He wasn't benched because he lacked skill. He was benched because someone made a personal decision not to play him and hid that decision behind vague excuses and internal politics. Meanwhile, Dillon Gabriel, another rookie, was running with higher units in practice. He even got first-team reps in certain packages. But Gabriel's camp numbers significantly lower than Shedeur's. So why the double standard? If this truly was a developmental environment, a system where all young players were treated with the same lens, then Shedeur should have been right there in the rotation. But he was, because this wasn't a developmental environment for him. It was a lockdown protocol designed to keep him away from the spotlight. And ironically, the person responsible for enforcing that wall of silence might be the very reason it crumbled. Because Jimmy Haslam went public, he put it in writing. He stood in front of cameras and said, "We talk about giving these guys a shot every day." That quote forced journalists to start asking, wait, if the owner wanted that, and if Shedeur was shining in camp, then who's not on the same page? And the answer came ringing back loud and clear: Kevin Stefanski. Stefanski didn't just ignore Shedeur, he sidestepped ownership. He ignored the performance metrics. He ignored the locker room whispers. And he ignored the chance to put the team's best young quarterback on the field, until injuries forced his hand. Shedeur wasn't part of the plan, not because Haslam didn't want him, but because Stefanski refused to adjust his plan, even when the facts left him no room to hide. And now that Shedeur is lighting it up, what has Haslam said? Nothing but support. What has Stefanski said? Silence, awkward praise, robotic coach speak. Like someone trying to talk his way around a mistake, he can no longer cover up. Because here's the thing. If Haslam supported Shedeur from the beginning, if the data showed he was QB1 during camp, and if the team still buried him behind 3 other passers, then every excuse Stefanski could possibly make starts to fall apart. You can't hide behind the development timeline excuse when another rookie with worse stats was promoted faster. You can't pretend it was about trust when the guy you trusted, Joe Flacco, came in cold off the couch and still got the job. This wasn't about trust. It wasn't about readiness. It wasn't about performance. It was a targeted agenda to suppress one player, and everyone else in the building is slowly realizing it, one press conference at a time. And now, NFL fans, media outlets, and analysts are staring at the same uncomfortable conclusion. Haslam was watching from the owner's box, wondering why his top-performing rookie wasn't playing. And Stefanski, he didn't care, because he never planned to play him. When the truth finally started cracking through the surface, when the QB tracker data went public, when fans started asking real questions, when Shedeur Sanders finally got on the field and showed out, you would think the Browns coaching staff would own up to their mistake. Just admit it. We misjudged him. He earned his shot. He proved us wrong. But that's not what happened. Instead, the next play they called covertly and through media whispers was something far more sinister. They started attacking the one thing data can't measure, Shedeur's character. As the performance argument collapsed, a new narrative started floating through the usual media mouthpieces. Well, maybe Shedeur wasn't putting in the work early on. He had a reputation around the building. That's what turned some people off. No sources, no specifics. Just vague, mysterious suggestions that maybe, just maybe, Shedeur was the problem all along. Sound familiar? It's the oldest play in sports media. When talent can no longer be denied, personality becomes the target. And this time, it didn't come from trolls on Twitter. It came from insiders, aligned with the Browns, who started saying things like, Tony G is reporting Shedeur wasn't doing the little things, maybe that's why he didn't earn trust. But what's missing from that claim? Evidence. Fact, Shedeur Sanders showed up every day. Fact, he outperformed every QB in practice. Fact, he absorbed the playbook, ran the offense, and outshined his teammates according to every internal metric. And what was his reward? Fourth string, radio silence from his head coach. And now, after dominating on the field, he's being hit with old-school character assassination. Let's look at the logic here. You take the best QB in your building. You redshirt him without competition. You tell him he's benched for the entire year no matter what. You give him 0 first-team reps. And then, when he stops smiling in the hallways or doing jumping jacks during film reviews, you label him not engaged. That's not football criticism. That's gaslighting. One ESPN Cleveland insider even pushed back live on air when the work ethic excuse came up. I don't know where they're getting that. But you try being told you're irrelevant, fourth string, redshirted, and not even allowed to compete, and still stay locked in 100% day after day. It's tough, and he's a young guy. Exactly. It's not a red flag if a 21-year-old rookie isn't whistling zippity-doo-dah through the halls after being deliberately buried by his own coaching staff. That's human. That's real. And that's what makes this deflection so dirty. They created a nearly impossible mental environment for Shedeur, and now they're using his natural reaction to justify how they treated him. It's all part of a familiar formula: deny performance. If exposed, shift the conversation to attitude. If challenged, make it about fit or culture. But with Shedeur, it backfired, again. Because once he got the opportunity, everything they said unraveled live in front of millions. He didn't show immaturity. He didn't look unprepared. He didn't collapse under pressure. In fact, he looked more composed than Flacco or Gabriel ever did. He led the huddle, called audibles, made back shoulder throws, converted on 3rd and long, scanned the field like a veteran, and most importantly, he delivered in crunch time, with the game on the line. So when the film couldn't lie, and the stats couldn't hide, and the crowd couldn't be silenced, they tried to fall back on the intangibles excuse. The shadowy locker room vibes that no one can prove or disprove. But let's ask the honest question. If Shedeur Sanders was such a locker room problem, why are none of his teammates saying it out loud? Where are the leaks? Where are the anonymous quotes? Where's the tension? It doesn't exist, because it's just another excuse. Another narrative designed to protect Kevin Stefanski and the coaching staff from the fact that they got it dead wrong, and got exposed by their own actions. They couldn't admit that personal bias about Shedeur, about his family, about the attention he gets, about his brand, clouded their judgment. They couldn't admit they had someone special in the building and chose to ignore it. So instead, they tried to rewrite history. He wasn't putting in the work. He wasn't doing what we wanted early. He needed to grow. But the tape says otherwise. The numbers scream otherwise. The result on the field shouts it louder than anything else. He was ready all along. The real question is, were they? Because Shedeur didn't crumble. He didn't lash out. He didn't get into Twitter beefs or call out coaches in post-game pressers. He kept working, kept preparing, kept believing. So when destiny finally swung the doors open, when injuries forced Stefanski's hand, Shedeur didn't ask for permission. He kicked that door in and changed the course of the Browns' season in 4 quarters. 4 quarters was all it took to dismantle months of manipulation. All it took to flip the narrative right back where it should have been from day one. This kid can play. They tried to bury him. 4th string, redshirted, ignored, silenced. But what they didn't count on was Shedeur Sanders being undeniable. Because when things fell apart, when injuries lit a fire under the depth chart and the coaching staff had no choice but to put him in, it wasn't a rookie moment. It wasn't panic. It wasn't developmental. It was a declaration. Shedeur didn't just play. He didn't just show promise. He exploded. In his first real NFL start, with cameras rolling and eyes watching, in a moment that could have overwhelmed even seasoned vets, Shedeur Sanders dropped 364 yards, 4 touchdowns, led 2 separate double-digit comeback drives, and looked like he'd been running the Browns' offense for years. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't raw talent getting lucky. This was elite poise, veteran-level reads, command, swagger, confidence, execution, everything the media said he lacked. He delivered. Every excuse they used to keep him off the field, he shattered. Every reason they buried him, he buried right back with every throw. And the silence from the Browns' coaching staff afterward, deafening. You could hear the shuffle, the scramble behind the scenes as analysts who'd pushed the narrative tried to spin a new one. Well, maybe he needed that time to learn. Maybe this was the plan all along. Let us be clear, no, it was. You don't redshirt QB1 unless you don't know he's QB1. You don't bury a leader like that unless you're trying to kill momentum before it starts. But But momentum has a funny way of resurrecting itself when the truth finally steps onto the field. And that's what made Shedeur's breakout so satisfying. It wasn't just about stats. It was what those stats represented. Every completion was a clapback. Every touchdown was a refutation of months of lies. Every yard gained was a yard stolen back from the people who tried to erase him. Because let's be honest, nobody expected this, except the ones who were telling the truth from the beginning. The scouts who said, "Watch the tape." The fans who read the camp reports and said, "Why isn't he QB2 at least?" The teammates who saw, every day, what he was doing in practice. They knew. They saw the footwork, the mechanics, the patience. They saw the guy who stayed after reps and studied the playbook deeper than most vets. And more importantly, they saw someone who never cracked, even while being completely shut out by the people in charge. That silent strength, that laser focus, that's not just talent, that's leadership. And when Shedeur finally took the field, the locker room felt it. You could see it in how his linemen played harder. You could see it in how the offense rallied with confidence. You could see it in how every single player lined up behind him. Not Flacco, not Gabriel, not Rudolph, Shedeur. Because leadership isn't about politics. It's not about being the coach's favorite. It's about stepping into chaos and bringing calm. And this kid brought clarity to a team that had spent the first half of their season in deliberate confusion. Now, the Browns face a brutal stretch. Josh Allen, Caleb Williams, Aaron Rodgers, Joe Burrow, 4 of the best quarterbacks in the league. 4 massive opportunities, 4 national stages. And who's at the helm for Cleveland? The guy they tried to redshirt. But here's the twist they didn't see coming. That adversity didn't crush Shedeur. It refined him, built him, hardened him into something more dangerous than a first-round pick or a golden boy prospect. He became a problem for defenses, for opposing coaches, and for anyone still hanging onto the lie that he wasn't ready. And the people who created that lie. Now they've got front row seats to watch him dismantle every excuse, every narrative, every lazy analysis that tried to stall his rise. Because this isn't just a feel-good story anymore. This is a franchise shift. The moment Shedeur took the field, the Browns had a future. Finally, not another journeyman plug-in, not a rush job, not a broken vet past his prime. An actual, real-deal franchise quarterback. And how many teams can say that with confidence? Forget the politics. Forget the personal agendas. The film doesn't lie, the scoreboard doesn't lie. And his numbers, they're already outpacing rookies taken higher than him, already outperforming guys with more reps and more trust, already making the Browns' opponents nervous. Because now everyone's asking the same question. Wait, if he was this good all along, why didn't they play him sooner? And in the background, quiet as ever, Kevin Stefanski might be asking himself the exact same thing. Because the moment Shedeur took over, the spotlight also shifted. To his throws, to his leadership, and to the decisions that kept him hidden for months. That light's only going to get brighter. And as it does, so will the questions, the accountability, and the comparisons between a player who's rising and a coaching staff that tried to bury him. By now, we all see it. The Shedeur Sanders story is no longer just about one quarterback getting his shot. It's no longer just about the Browns' coaching staff dropping the ball, or about insiders parroting a false narrative. It's bigger than Cleveland. Because if this can happen to a quarterback like Shedeur, under national scrutiny, with elite production, and the spotlight of Deion Sanders in the stands, how many other players are being buried right now by someone's agenda? This is the NFL's dirty secret that rarely makes headlines. Talent doesn't always win. Sometimes it gets picked apart. Sometimes it gets miscategorized, and sometimes it gets intentionally erased. Shedeur had the numbers, he had the tape, he had the performance, so what kept him off the field? Politics, ego, control. Think about it, in a league that's supposed to be a meritocracy, best man plays, prove it every week. We just saw a situation where none of that mattered. He outplayed guys in practice, didn't matter. He absorbed the system, still fourth string. He stayed patient, respectful, focused. Still redshirted, because he wasn't the chosen one, because someone in power simply didn't like him. Now stop and ask yourself something. How many Shedeurs are out there right now, on other teams, in other locker rooms, who will never even get the chance to prove themselves? You think this is just a Browns problem? Not even close. Across the league, coaching staffs are making decisions based on comfort, favoritism, control, not truth. It's the undrafted safety who plays harder than the draft pick but never makes the final 53. It's the backup receiver who shines in camp but gets fewer reps because he wasn't a front office guy. It's the rookie quarterback who slips in the draft and gets buried, even though the film doesn't lie. These agendas are invisible at first, subtle, hidden beneath cliché press quotes like, "We're easing him in. We like his development. He needs to grow into the system." Those aren't reasons. Those are deflections, and we as fans eat them up because we trust the coaches. But what Shedeur's story just exposed is this: even the coaches can be dead wrong. And sometimes they're wrong on purpose. Because giving power to a young, dynamic, spotlighted quarterback like Shedeur, that doesn't just shift the offense. That shifts the narrative, the control, the locker room culture, the media attention. And for coaches with fragile egos or outdated views, that's dangerous. Because now suddenly, you're no longer the smartest guy in the room. Now you've got a 21-year-old reading defenses better than your vet. Now you've got fans asking why your third-round pick isn't playing. Now you've got accountability. And let's be honest, the NFL, like every other billion-dollar machine, isn't built on pure merit. It's built on power. Which is why we see players like Shedeur get silenced, until fate, injuries, or pure force of performance finally let them loose. But how many never make it that far? How many got gaslit into thinking they were the problem? How many had their confidence destroyed, not because they weren't good enough, but because the people in charge had already decided they didn't fit the plan? That's the real tragedy here. Because we almost lost a franchise quarterback to nothing but pride and politics. And if Shedeur doesn't have the mental toughness, the family support, the personal faith, and the preparation behind the scenes, this story could have gone a whole different way. He could have been another cautionary tale, another he just never panned out, another name fans forget. Instead, he became the exception. But this system, this pattern of protecting egos over opportunity, is ruining careers. Quietly, daily. Ask yourself, how many future Pro Bowlers are holding clipboards right now? How many MVP-level talents never even touched the field? How many cast-offs just needed the right coach, the right belief, the right chance? Because Shedeur didn't change, the system around him did. One injury and the mask came off. And now, the people who controlled the narrative are exposed right alongside the agenda. So here's the new narrative, the one fans should start repeating loudly across stadiums and social media: let performance speak. Period. Forget who was drafted where. Forget who the coaching staff likes. Forget the politics in the building. Put the best player on the field. And if you're wrong, admit it. Adjust. Learn. Because otherwise, you're not building a winning team, you're running a country club. Shedeur Sanders is just one example. High profile, high stakes, and lucky enough to break through. But for every Shedeur that survives the politics, how many never even get that chance? What started as a quiet whisper, training camp stats, hushed media comments, and a young quarterback stuck at fourth string, has now blown up into one of the most shocking NFL stories of the season. Shedeur Sanders was never supposed to start this year. Not because he wasn't good enough, not because he wasn't ready, but because certain people didn't want him to win. Let's be clear, this wasn't incompetence. This was intentional. Kevin Stefanski, the head coach of the Cleveland Browns, made it crystal clear, without ever using words, that Shedeur wasn't part of his plan. 2 months. No mention, no acknowledgement, no opportunity. He wasn't outplayed. He wasn't unprepared. He was erased. But here's the thing about people with agendas. They always assume you'll stay quiet forever. That you'll take the disrespect, the gaslighting, the unfair criticism, and fold. That you won't fight back because they made sure you had no platform to do so. What they didn't account for was Shedeur just waiting patiently with that ace in his hand. And when the injury bug finally crashed through the glass ceiling they built over him, Shedeur stepped on that field and did one thing: expose them all. The fake narratives. The biased decisions. The coach who gave everyone else a shot but him, with one performance, 364 yards, 4 touchdowns, multiple comeback drives, Shedeur Sanders didn't just win a game. He changed everything. He turned silence into noise. He turned whispers into headlines. And he turned Kevin Stefanski from a coach with control into a man with questions to answer. Because now, the national spotlight is focused squarely on Cleveland. Every analyst, every reporter, every former coach wants to know, how did you miss this? Why did it take injuries to make the right call? If this kid was your best QB, what else are you getting wrong? And for Stefanski, there's no good answer, because this wasn't a scouting error. This wasn't a "he just wasn't ready" story. This was about control, power, and a coach who couldn't admit he was wrong. He let ego write the depth chart, and now, he's at risk of letting ego cost him his job. Because Shedeur's not a secret anymore. He's a star. He's a franchise quarterback with the stat lines, the leadership, the poise, and now the receipts to prove it. And while Kevin Stefanski backpedals through press conferences and insiders scramble to save face, Shedeur's already doing what elite quarterbacks do, looking ahead. Next up, Josh Allen, Caleb Williams, Aaron Rodgers, Joe Burrow, 4 elite quarterbacks, 4 showcase games. 4 opportunities for Shedeur to prove, without a shadow of a doubt, that not only is he a starter, he's the future. Because here's the beauty of this story: despite all the lies, despite all the suppression, despite the 4th-string placement, despite the media manipulation, despite the blame games and character attacks, Shedeur still rose. He didn't lash out. He didn't scream on social media. He just waited, prepared, believed, and when the lights came on, he flipped the entire narrative in a single afternoon. That's the kind of redemption arc you don't see every day. And it just made a lot of power players in Cleveland and across the NFL very nervous. Because Shedeur proved what many suspected: the system is flawed. Agenda often beats talent. Politics often trumps production. And guys like Shedeur, they have to be twice as good just to get noticed, let alone respected. But there's something poetic about what's happening now. The same insiders who ran with false information are now correcting themselves. The same media figures who labeled him not ready are now calling him franchise caliber. The same coach who never said his name is now being forced to start him, highlight him, and talk about him in pressers. That's what real vindication looks like. Not a tweet, not an argument, not a clapback, but performance so undeniable that even your enemies have to applaud it. And here's the part no one saw coming. By trying to bury Shedeur, they might have accidentally saved the Browns. Because for once, their future looks clear. Not centered around a journeyman, not stuck with aging vets, not gambling on stopgap solutions, but built around a quarterback who was there the whole time, just waiting to be seen. So here's the takeaway: this is a win for every underdog who's been overlooked. This is a warning to every coach who lets their pride get in the way of personnel. And this is a reminder to fans: just because someone's at the top doesn't mean they know what's best. The best players don't always start week 1. The most talented leaders don't always get drafted first. And sometimes the biggest stars are hiding in plain sight because somebody wanted it that way. Not anymore. Shedeur Sanders is here. He's QB1. He's winning. And now those who tried to stop him. They're in the rear view mirror, watching him thrive, watching him lead, watching him become everything they said he couldn't be. Because the most powerful revenge is simply proving them wrong, week after week after week. Now it's your turn. Do you think this was an isolated incident, or are there more Shedeurs getting buried across the league? Drop your thoughts below. Like, comment, and if you want the full breakdown on how other coaches are making the same mistakes with their rookies, be sure to subscribe, because we're about to name names.